If you can do that, then no amount of water in your face or guys screaming at you is going to really bother you once you get into these environments. The best thing you can do to build your mental fortitude and your resilience is show up on a daily basis and complete the things that you said you were going to complete. Welcome to the Infinite Grit Podcast. This is the show for those preparing to earn their place in special operations and other elite tactical careers. We break down the training, mindset, and strategies required to get selected and continue performing long-term. These are proven principles to help you build the body, the mind, and resilience to step into the fight. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Infinite Grit Podcast. My name is John Hamilton. I'm a former Green Beret and now strength coach and mentor for those training for and pursuing a career in special operations. And today I want to talk about the most impactful deployment that I went on during my military career. I was in for 10 years, went on 2 trips to Afghanistan, 1 trip to Iraq, and then did a JSET in Eastern Europe. And with every one of these trips, I learned a ton. I came out of the trip seemingly a different person, more confident, more capable, and there are a lot of skills that I didn't really start digesting until after I got out of the military, or lessons learned from these deployments. But one of the most impactful deployments that I went on had nothing to do with me going to combat. And I like telling this story because I think a lot of times we can just talk about the combat side of deployments, which is cool. There's a lot of lessons to pull from combat situations. There's a lot of things that we can learn from these different environments. But that is only a small part of what a deployment actually consists of, both in the regular Army, 160th, Special Operations, and especially within Special Forces. As a Green Beret, and especially as an 18 Charlie, there are many things that you need to do around camp with different sources, with different personnel that you're talking to, whatever, that you need to manage to facilitate those operations even taking place. And for myself, I always learned quite a bit from this constant stream of work because you're spending a lot of time doing it. And one of the deployments that was the most impactful in my life up to this point was when I was with the 160th and I deployed to Iraq. I actually had my 21st birthday standing on the Baghdad International Airport main runway installing backup generators for a system we were emplacing. At the time, I was working in an aviation capacity. I worked with the MQ-1 Charlie Gray Eagle, which is a 56-foot wingspan drone, carries 4 Hellfires, big airplane that we were tasked with going there and installing a site. And if you know anything about aviation, you know that typically all of the infrastructure is in place. The electrical is in place. There's a hangar there. You just have to show up, put your planes together, plug things in, and start running operations. Well, we were getting a tour of the base by app, and we walked into this open lot that was surrounded by T-walls, and the person that was giving us the tour was like, all right, this is where you guys are going to be. And we had a small group of guys, and we kind of looked at each other and laughed, and we're like, okay, like, where's the hangar? Kind of, not mocking him, but like, what's going on here? Well, he laughs at us, and he looks and points to a Connex over in the corner, and he's like, it's in there. And that's when it dawned on us, and you saw us all go poopy face, realizing that we have to build this hangar. And there was 5 of us. And to put it in perspective, this was like a 100-meter plus hangar that had to hold 4 of these aircraft, an entire tactical operations center with offices, with electrical, everything. And we had to build it with a very small team. So over the next 8 weeks or so, we were working 16, sometimes 18-hour days building this, like literally drilling the plates into the ground to connect the poles and raise the poles utilizing these forklifts that we, acquired, and getting everything in place. It was a massive operation. And we had pretty much no guidance. We had one guy who was the most impressive warrant officer, one of the most impressive warrant officers that I've worked with up until this date, that was delegating and providing some guidance. But much of our learning and putting this hangar together was sourced from YouTube or what we could Google, what we could find around there. And it was this like Frankenstein hangar was such an operation that there were times where we went out to old Camp Victory, which if you know anything about the Iraq War, Camp Victory was where a lot of soldiers stayed at Baghdad. And when we pulled out, they just left like within a couple days. Very rapid withdrawal of troops from Camp Victory. And you go out to old barracks and there's, people's personal items still in the barracks. There's clothes. Well, all of the buildings still had all of the electrical, the light bulbs, all this stuff. So we would go out to Camp Victory and strip electrical from the walls. I remember standing in the back of trucks, unscrewing light bulbs in these asbestos-filled buildings that were long abandoned, and taking electrical boxes off the wall. And as a maintainer who's trained to work on aircraft, none of my job description was running electrical or doing any type of carpentry work, but there was nobody that was coming to help us. And we needed to figure it out because at the time, what was happening was there was a fifth group team that was guarding a oil refinery in the area, and they were getting hit every night by ISIS. This is when ISIS was starting to build up pretty big in Iraq. And we had pretty limited air support. And the reason for sending our planes out there is to provide these guys air support. They carry 4 Hellfires, so obviously they can do a lot of damage. So we were highly motivated to get these planes off the ground, not just for completing the mission, but providing these guys with the support that they needed to potentially save lives. So we had a very intrinsic motivation. And I remember at the end of this 8 weeks, we started building our aircraft, like completed the hangar, building the aircraft on Christmas morning, which was a really cool thing because it was our goal to get it done by Christmas. But I remember doing our first flight and standing in our makeshift tactical operations center that I literally slapped some plywood on the wall and screw a TV into it, and watching the planes drop the very first Hellfire of the deployment on a Dishka position, which is a big gun that they had mounted on the roof of one of these buildings. And that was one of the most fulfilling parts of my entire career, is seeing all of that work we put in over those 8-week period, all of the challenges, the Frankenstein in this hangar together, digging trenches to run wiring to it, figuring out how to put breakers in a breaker box and run electrical through the entire building, all of this stuff that led to this Hellfire getting dropped on this Dishka position. And it was an immense amount of pride. And I share this with you guys because up until that point, I had never been placed in a situation where I had to just figure everything out. There was always somebody there to provide me guidance, to provide me information. If I didn't have what I needed to do the job, I would ask for it and they would give me what I needed to do the job. But that was not the case in this situation. And for me, like, I grew up in the city primarily with a single mom until my mom met my stepdad my sophomore year of high school. So doing carpentry or doing any of this stuff, fixing stuff around the house, it wasn't something that I did. It just wasn't necessary when I grew up, and it was never a big focus of mine. So that was an invaluable opportunity, and it really shifted my perspective. Like, coming back from this deployment, I was a different person because now I have the confidence that I am able to go out there and find the information, and in imperfect conditions, I can still get the job done, think outside the box, be resourceful, and complete the task at hand, which is a very necessary skill set, not only within special operations, but as a man, in my opinion, in general. So I share all this to answer the question that I get pretty often, and guys ask, should I go prior service or should I go in with another MOS and then go to selection down the road? And I reflect back on my situation. If I would have joined the military and gone to selection right away, it would have been a different circumstance. Would I have been successful? I don't know. That's impossible to tell. But would I have been as an effective 18 Charlie or Green Beret when I got to that team and went to Afghanistan right away? Absolutely not, because these skill sets directly correlated to what I was going to be doing in the future. I just didn't know it yet. And the simple answer to your question of, like, do you need to go prior service to get selected, is no. you don't. The 18 X-ray pipeline would not exist if you needed to go prior service to be successful in Special Forces or even be a Green Beret. Some of the best Green Berets I ever met were 18 X-rays. But you should put yourself in a position like this where you're going to have to figure things out. You're not going to have your hand held. You're not going to be provided with all the answers. And the intangibles and the skill sets that you get from this environment will help you perform not only in selection, but on a team, to problem solve, to think outside the box, to work inside of a team, to be resourceful, to communicate, to delegate. All of these skills are developed through experience. We can read books about it all day long. I have Extreme Ownership over there on the table that I just looked at. It's a great book. There's a lot of valuable information in there, and I'm a big proponent of reading books to take and learn things from others' experience. I think it can make us more efficient, but at the end of the day, we have to go in there and we have to be put in a position to actually employ that information we learn. So do you have to go prior service? No, you don't. But should you seek opportunities to do things like this? Absolutely. And there are tons of free opportunities to do so. You can volunteer to build houses for people. There's plenty of services that do that. You can volunteer to help with recovery aids, like what happened down in Texas. Volunteering for something like that, if you're in the area, is a great opportunity to be put in one of these positions. And those experiences are going to be some of the most invaluable things that you can do to build the traits to be successful at selection. So, again, that was one of the most impactful situations for me. I learned everything from all of my deployments. When I went to combat with group, I learned a ton from that deployment, but it was never this massive paradigm shift like I experienced in that Iraq trip. And that brings me to the first question of the week, which is prepping for National Guard SF/SOCOM Athlete Hell Day. How can I make sure I have the resilience and mental fortitude to succeed in this environment? The National Guard, or I'm going to go SOCOM Athlete Hell Day, is a 2 or 3 day event. It's very similar to the SFRE, so Special Forces Readiness Examination, where you're going to do your PT test. You're going to be doing your 2-mile run, 5-mile run, 12-mile ruck, etc., all that stuff. And then throughout it, they're going to smoke you a little bit, spray you in the face with water, do things like that. These environments, the ones that are officially sanctioned, like SOCOM Athlete, SFRE, are fantastic opportunities to, one, test where your physical numbers are at, and two, get exposure to these environments. When you get a selection, nobody's going to be yelling at you, screaming at you, all that type of stuff. Well, the selection, Instagram just put out doing log PT, so maybe they're bringing it back. But typically, they're just going to be very, very stoic. What these 72-hour events do is just give you exposure to it so that you relatively know what to expect and how to handle it when you get into the environment down the road. And they are not going to teach you the mental fortitude or the resilience. If you guys know Nate over at Valhalla Firearms Training, he started a new channel called American Thor, which I actually think is really good. He's funny. But he did a video talking about MDK, the Modern Day Night Project. And he made a fantastic point. I agree with his whole video, but he made a fantastic point that these guys are trying to change their lives in 72 hours. And they're trying to develop this mental discipline, this fortitude within 72 hours. That is not where it comes from. So for this individual asking about going to, SOCOM Athlete and making sure that you have the resilience and mental fortitude in place, that is developed on a daily basis. And that is why we emphasize so much just being consistent, showing up, doing the work, having a very high adherence, completing and fulfilling the promises you make to yourself on a daily basis. If you can do that, then no amount of water in your face or guys screaming at you is going to really bother you once you get into these environments. The best thing you can do to build your mental fortitude and your resilience is show up on a daily basis and complete the things that you said you were going to complete. When you're doing a 5-mile run and you're running a 2.5-mile loop and you run past your truck at that 2.5 miles, do you stop and call it a day saying that you got decent stimulus and it was enough for today? Or are you the person that fulfills it and actually completes the entire run? Those are the little things that build the traits, build the resilience and the mental fortitude that enable us to perform in these environments. We cannot just rely on a 72-hour event to get that. That is just a demonstration. It's just a test of it and see if we, have it, but it's not going to really build those types of things. So prepping for SFRE, National Guard SF, you don't have to smoke yourself. You don't have to do endless gut check style workouts. What you do have to do is fulfill your promises, show up on a daily basis with consistency, a high level of adherence to what you're working towards, and do that for a prolonged period of time. And I always like to say that going to Special Forces assessment and selection, I want you guys to think about it differently. I want you to think about going to Special Forces assessment and selection as the demonstration. This is an environment where you demonstrate all of the work that you have put in through showing up for yourself, showing up and doing the workouts on a consistent basis over a long period of time. It's a demonstration of all of the traits that you have developed through doing that, through putting yourself in difficult situations and pushing through when you felt like quitting. SFAS is a demonstration of all those things. And there's no tricks, there's no hacks, there's nothing that you can employ that is going to enable you to fake it. You just have to go there and perform. But the ability to perform and what they're looking for and all of the traits are developed through the years or months of being consistent and putting in the work on a daily basis and working on yourself. That is where that resilience and mental fortitude comes from. All right, diving into the Q&A this week. The next question is, what are your thoughts on fasting for 24 hours every once in a while? I like it. Personally, I fast 1 to 2 times per week, typically on Sundays. I'll usually let loose a little bit on Saturdays. So feel like, lowering my intake on Sundays is a good idea. But doing a 24-hour fast every once in a while, like once a month, once every 2 months, is completely fine. There are a lot of health benefits associated with these prolonged fasts. The word that comes to mind that everyone loves to say in the fasting world is autophagy, which is clearing out a lot of the dead or damaged cells and giving our body a chance to regenerate new ones in this environment. So fasting for a prolonged period of time is great. We don't want to get too crazy with fasting. It's very easy to do because we might feel great. We might have a little higher epinephrine or higher adrenaline when we are fasting, so we feel like we're a little bit more focused. There are physiological effects that make us feel like fasting is great, but from a performance standpoint, we need to fuel our bodies. We need to have the glycogen stores. We need to have the protein to prepare the muscle fibers. We need to have these resources available to us to make the adaptations physiologically possible. So what I would say is it's completely fine to do every once in a while. If you're training for performance, training for a selection, don't get too into the weeds or too obsessed with doing very frequent fasts. But I would note that we are not that fragile. When I was in Afghanistan, we had a PJ attached to my team, and this guy would do these 72-hour fasts while we're running operations. And there were multiple times where he went out on an operation with us, and I knew he was in a fasted state and deep into a fast too, and he wouldn't eat until we got back. Luckily, nothing happened, but the thing that was always in the back of my mind is like, what if we get stuck out here? Like, what if we get into a big firefight and take casualties, and now we have to carry people out of here? It's August, 100 degrees at midnight with a bunch of humidity. Like, what happens in this environment to him, one of our medics as a pararescueman, if something goes down and he's in a very deep fasted state? So nothing ever happened. Thankfully, that required him to have a very high level of output, but those are the types of things that we don't want to do. It kind of opened my eyes to how we're not fragile, and he performed pretty well in a fasted state, but we still want to make sure if we're going to perform or if we're maximizing performance that we have the resources available to us so our body can access them and perform through these tough environments. Don't take the story of the PJ as like a green light to just fast and crush yourself in these fasted states. He was the only one I've ever seen do it, and he did make us nervous quite a bit with it, but luckily nothing ever happened to have him need to carry anybody out or anything like that. Next question is, and this is a very common one we get, what are your thoughts on doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu / MMA during selection prep? There are a lot of BJJ in and of itself is stress inoculation. If you have a 250-pound dude in a gi in a very hot dojo laying on top of you and you're trying to get out while he's trying to choke you to death, that is a stressful situation. And I think martial arts absolutely helps guys perform in difficult environments. Wrestlers that come out of high school and perform, football players, like they usually have this edge to them that can help them perform inside of selections environments. But with that, we don't want to do it right up until we go to selection. If you're 6 months plus out from going to selection, have at it, go train, have a good time. Within that 6 months, you could still roll, but I would say like keep it easy. Don't roll with the overzealous white belts. If you are doing sparring sessions at the end of the workout, like let your partner know easy on, easy off. Like you're not trying to tear a ligament or tear something going into the selection prep. And then that 3 month out before going to selection, I would cut out all BJJ, MMA, martial arts from your training, because the likelihood of you taking these injuries sustained in the sport into selection is pretty high. There's always tweaks. There's always pains with rolling. Like things just happen, right? And we don't want to sabotage potentially years of hard work because we didn't want to step away from jiu-jitsu for a couple months. I promise you it's going to be there on the backside of going to selection. Focus on getting through selection within those 3 months. The benefits of conditioning, etc., is not going to outweigh the risk, and it's not even a direct translation to being able to carry a ruck, being able to run, etc. It's good for cardiovascular conditioning, but it doesn't do anything for your impact resistance, doesn't strengthen the muscles that are going to require you to carry a load, doesn't have load on your tendons and ligaments. So we don't want to do it at the expense of getting the right amount of volume to drive up the numbers that we need to perform in this environment. So 6 months plus, good to do it all day. Within that 6 months, start rolling smart, reduce the stimulus that you're doing, the number of sessions you're doing throughout the week. Within that 3 months, cut it out, and it'll be there on the backside of selection. Next question is how to get the MOS you want in SF, and are 18 Charlies that susceptible to head blasts? So at selection, once you get like 2/3 of the way through, I think once you get back from land nav or something like that, they will give you guys a sheet that, you basically put your wish list on there. Like I put, 18 Charlie number 1. I think I put 18 Bravo number 2, Echo, and Delta. Last thing I wanted to do was be a Delta at the time, primarily because the pipeline was so long. Looking back, I think a Delta is a great thing. And the more I learned about medical, the more medical courses I went to, the more I was like, damn, I could be an 18 Delta. But you will get a wish list at selection. And at the end of selection, when they tell you whether or not you got selected, they will tell you which MOS you got as well and cut you orders for that. So, it's usually like, I don't really know. Nobody really knows unless they're the ones cutting the orders. Like it's based on MTO. So the amount of MOSs or the MOS that they might be short on at the time in need, which is typically Deltas. And it's also based on GT score. Like if someone comes in with a 144 GT score, which is an indication that they're pretty smart, they're probably not going to give you 18 Bravo. Even if it's your first choice, they might be like, hey, this guy is very smart. We're probably going to give him Echo or Delta and try to put you into one of the more scarce MOSs that they usually need guys in. But you get a wish list, and then at the end of selection, you figure out what MOS you got. I haven't really heard of guys, there's guys who go do the 18 Delta pipeline and maybe they fail that first, what is it called? The EMTB that they have to do in the beginning, which is a crash course with EMT. And to put it into perspective, EMTB is usually a 6-month course on the civilian side, and they will cram that into about 5 weeks, probably 4 weeks of actual training. So you have to study your ass off. And a lot of guys in the 18 Delta pipeline failed that initial test. And when I was going through, at least, a lot of the guys going to 18 Echo or even coming to 18 Charlie were guys who failed out of the Delta pipeline. So that's the only time that I really have heard of guys changing MOSs, but I'm not going to say it's impossible. Next question is it possible to go special forces if you wear glasses? Yeah, absolutely possible to go special forces if you wear glasses. Obviously, there's a vision requirement, but you don't need perfect vision to go to special forces. And actually, you'll see a lot of guys getting LASIK or PRK at the end of the Q course, like once you start language. I don't think they'll give it to you or sign off on it as you're going through the course, but typically once you graduate and you go into language, they'll sign off on it, and then you have like a 4-day that you recover and take drops while you're in language school for a couple of weeks. I did LASIK through the Army when I was in the 160th. So I was stationed at Fort Huachuca, and then I ended up PCSing, permanent change of station, moving out to Fort Campbell. And I intentionally delayed going to selection so I could get LASIK, because I remember when I was going through enlisted green platoon for the 160th, or EGP, my glasses were fogging up and I couldn't see shit walking around the woods in the, Tennessee woods in the middle of the summer. It was so humid that I was like, man, I'm going to selection. I'm going to be required to do land navigation. I want to make sure that I don't wear glasses that fog up and ruin my chances of being successful. So I delayed going to selection so I could get LASIK. So if you are prior service, you can get LASIK through the military, and I absolutely recommend doing so. All right, we'll touch on a couple more questions. Went a little fast today. So we got a couple questions from the Instagram. If you guys don't follow us on Instagram, I'm going to start putting stories up there asking for questions for the podcast, and then I'm going to make content based on that as well. So head over to the Instagram, give us a follow, and then drop your questions in there, or you can drop them down into the comments. Next question is, how do you handle comparing yourself to others? And this is something that admittedly, like, I struggled with for a long time. I think sometimes, it can still get to me like it gets to a lot of people. And I think the biggest thing, especially with guys who are very ambitious and we're very competitive, we can always look at others who are seemingly our competition and we feel like we're behind with them. But the approach that I encourage guys to take is, don't look at guys and see where they're at, which is like an outward projection. You don't understand what's going on in their life or all the stuff that they went through to get to that point, and just blindly think that you are not where you need to be. That is a detrimental way to look at the competition. Instead, what I want you guys to do is look at where others are at and dissect how they got there, or use that as an inspiration to and as proof to that you are able to get to that point as well. And if you do those things, it's a much healthier way to continue making progress, and it doesn't hurt our motivation. It helps it. There's a saying that says, comparison is the thief of joy. And when we are pursuing something like going SF, like starting a business, if we constantly compare ourselves to other individuals and think, oh, I'm behind, I'm losing, everything's falling apart, blah, 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 then it is going to be robbing us of our motivation, when in all actuality, they have just probably put in the work for a little bit longer than us. And if we do the same thing, and if we dissect the things that they are doing that is working, we figure out what they're doing that isn't working, and we build off of it, we can continue to perform and continue to see that progress. I think there's usually two things that people do. They either completely neglect looking at the competition and make their process maybe a little bit slower because they think that they could just figure it out or do it all on their own. And then they have to go through all of the challenges that those individuals face and learn the same lessons to get to the same point. So what we can do is look at those other individuals, see how they got to that point, ask questions maybe. And the goal of it is to dissect and figure out what challenges they faced, how they overcame them, so we can implement that now and get faster results. And then the other side of the coin is guys digging in way too much and putting those guys on a pedestal, or thinking that they're not at the point that they need to be at this certain point in life. Like, we all go through different phases of our lives, and thinking that we're not where we need to be, or we're behind because we're 25 years old and still not a Green Beret or something like that, is a flawed way of thinking. We all have different experiences, just like what I talked about in the beginning of this podcast. The experiences that you get between that 5 years or whatever, like that is all going to mold you into the individual that's going to be able to succeed in these environments. Maybe 5 years ago, you would have fallen on your face, but now that you've had some trials and tribulations, you've done something, you've been in the workforce, like everything that we do has lessons within it that we can extract and apply moving forward. So never think you're behind with anything. We just have different areas of focus or different things that we're pursuing at different points in our lives. All right. And then last question. All right. We'll do a training question. Best way to program carries. Is 3 by 100 meters enough to see adaptations? 3 by 100 meters is absolutely enough to see adaptations. SFAS put out a training guide, and their number that they put out was being able to carry a 50-pound weight for 200 meters. Now, I think that's a little bit low. That's, not super challenging for most guys that have been training for a while. But doing things like short carries with heavy weight to build up that strength, and then things like bar hangs or longer carry with lighter weight to build up that strength endurance is a good idea. We typically like to include carries 3 sometimes, or grip work 3 times, sometimes 4 times per week, depending on the individual. And all of those sessions will look a little bit shorter. Some of them might be 3 sets of 100 feet carrying very heavy weight. I'm talking, 100 pounds, 120 pounds on each side, depending on where you're at. That is going to build up your maximum grip strength. And if we have very high level of grip strength, then 50 pounds ain't going to feel like shit when we go to do the grip endurance. But we do have to hit grip endurance as well. A good way to measure this is doing things like 200 meters, 400 meter carries with a little punishment when you drop the weight. One of my favorite ones is doing a 400 meter carry with a challenging weight that you think you might be able to get. And then anytime you set it down, you have to do, 25 4-count flutter kicks or burpees or some type of punishment inside of there. So doing things like that can absolutely help build that grip endurance. We just want to make sure that we're doing it enough to get the stimulus throughout the week, but not doing it so much where we create a ton of fatigue and we start plateauing our numbers. But the biggest thing is track your numbers over a period of time. If you see the weights going up, if you see the distances growing, if you can carry, more 5 pounds heavier this week or 5 pounds heavier this block for 200 meters than you were last block, then you are getting stronger and seeing those adaptations. So it's fundamentally important that you guys track your numbers when you're doing training, not only for grip strength, but with run times, strength work, etc. It's going to be very, very important. But that is all the questions I got for today. I'm going to be touching on some of these questions in another podcast coming up next week, and then creating some content on the Instagram for it as well. If you have any questions for me that you want answered in a future podcast, drop them down in the comment section below. And if you are looking to go into a special operations career, or just get in the best shape of your life and want a custom plan built to you to ensure that you make the progress, the mentorship, and the accountability along the way, there's a link to that down in the description. But other than that, appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you in the next episode.